Hello, all you listeners. This is Lauren O'Brien, and you guys are listening to Black Sheep and Bad Apples, the podcast where we write things and scripts very sober, but then we perform them in various states of inebriation. And tonight we've got a special night. But first, before we go into it, I'd like to introduce my co-hosts, Mr. Sean. Here at the fourth corner, putting us on. How you feeling, baby?
Not too shabby.
Yeah.
A little heat struck, a little fly ridden.
Heat struck, I like that. Fly ridden, yeah. And I'm not winking at you intentionally, it's just my contacts keep drying out, so.
Liar.
If it makes it seem like I'm hitting on either of you guys tonight.
You're not supposed to give off the subtle cues that we do that the audience can't see.
Yeah, this is a strictly audio platform, so I guess.
Which is odd, I was going to bring that up, that you keep winking at me as cues or something, and I think you're just like, then you smile.
I mean,
like
let's
that, and I'm
just be honest. If this was video, we wouldn't be allowed to be naked without editing out our junk anyway.
And as you guys know and love, the other co-host of this show, Mr. Sam Mitchell, is here, as you guys were hearing.
That's me.
So how do you guys feel about doing our first podcast episode naked together?
I mean, I'm pretty comfortable with my body, so it doesn't really bother me.
You're the only one sitting below table level.
Well, and it's just because I don't want you guys to see everything.
I'm literally spread eagle like Jane Fonda in whatever that movie was.
Well, honestly, it's because I have to fold my legs up a little bit in order to walk around in shoes, and so I don't want to show you guys how strangely long my legs are.
Your extra knees?
I have extra knees. Anyway, tonight's episode is actually going to be a special episode, listeners, as we are doing the co-host takeover. And tonight's co-host takeover episode will be brought to you by a Mr. Sam. So I'll go ahead and...
That's me.
You feeling ready to take them reins?
The golden boy.
You gonna take the wheel and drive, baby?
Child of destiny, Sam!
Shift them gears.
Oh, yeah. We got some fun shit to talk about tonight.
What are we doing tonight, Sam?
Oh, we're talking about drugs.
Oh, hell yeah.
Oh, yeah. We're talking about drugs. Tonight we're going to be talking about a nitrogenous organic compound of the alkaloid group. Alkaloid group, which...
Did you say nitrogenous?
Alkaloids are, nitrogenous.
So like androgynous, but for the drug world?
Yeah, like nitrogenous.
Means it's like...
Means it has nitrogen in
nitrogen.
The organic compound.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, for our listeners, nitrogenous means it is a chemical compound that involves nitrogen. And it's an alkaloid drug. Alkaloid drugs are substances that have distinct or strong physiological and, by virtue of this, psychoactive effects.
So they have a high...
Like cocaine, heroin.
So they have a high pH.
Probably.
Yeah.
I would probably. I'm just guessing. I don't really know.
They're not too acidic.
So tonight we're going to be talking about a central nervous system stimulant of the methylxanthine class, also known as methyltheobromide or 1,3,7-trimethylxanthine.
We're like 2 sentences into your episode, and you are already over sciencing.
Yeah,
there's just
I gotta
not
get
over,
these bits
but
out of
there's
the way.
so much science.
Another name that it goes by is guaranine.
Oh, okay.
This chemical was first isolated in the early part of the 19th century, and it is the world's most widely consumed psychoactive drug. It's legal and unregulated in nearly all countries, and it's a chemical with a truly long history in human society. And so I would ask the listeners, and you guys already know what it is, but I'll ask the listeners to take a guess at what they think it is. And
we're going to pause.
We're going to do a pause real quick.
Yeah, we're done.
So what do you guys think it is? What do you boys think about this?
I mean, guaranine, I think I've seen it on like energy drink cans.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. You'll see that as a substitute name for caffeine.
Oh, shit. They're the same thing?
Caffeine and guaranine are the exact same thing. Those are just different names for caffeine. It's the same exact chemical compound.
Gotcha.
It is 1,3,7-trimethylxanthine. That's its actual chemical name.
Scientifically, they call caffeine guarine.
No, scientifically they call it trimethylxanthine.
So does guarine come from...
Guaranine.
Guaranine, okay. Right.
So
I just keep thinking of the band Gore, and then I'm...
It's spelled Guaranine. Guaranine.
But I guess what I was getting at is caffeine mostly, I feel like, thought of comes from the coffee bean. So does guaranine come from a coffee bean?
It sounds like...
caffeine is actually found in hundreds of plants.
Yeah, you can get it from chicory, actually.
No, you can't.
No. Actually, I'm thinking of something
else. But there is and we'll get to it later in this podcast. But there is a pretty prevalent bush, a type of holly in the North America that produces a very high amount of caffeine. And we'll talk about that. I was interested.
It honestly sounds like the reason, because I'm thinking back to that, like those Monster energy drinks and why they have guaranine on them, and I'm thinking like it's a marketing name. It's like how acetaminophen gets like marketed as aspirin or whatever the brand name is.
Don't get confused between guaranine and guarine. Those are two different chemical compounds.
Sounds like you're going to cover it if we just shut up.
I'm actually not going to cover the other chemical compounds. We're just going to be talking about caffeine, not particularly. We'll touch a little bit on energy drinks and stuff like that, but in a very mild sense.
Yeah.
Because what I was really more interested in is like the history of caffeine and how it's affected human society. You know, we all know what we think of as the benefits of caffeine. In fact, I'm drinking a perfect example of a historical amalgamation of caffeine. It's a coffee drink with mocha in it, so it's got chocolate as well.
Oh, so you're faded.
Cocoa beans have caffeine. That's another. Historically, that was a drink that caused a stimulating effect that was used in many different ways in
just like eating a chocolate
South American culture. Yeah. Right. Like so I started digging. It's like, what's the history of caffeine? I found an interesting little article on Weebly.com, which is not my favorite thing, but it's pretty well written and it's short, and I'm gonna just read that now because it does give it gives a real snapshot of the history of coffee, not the history of caffeine. But caffeine comes from the word coffee, which comes from a Arabic word, kawe. And we'll see how that progressed from West Africa, where coffee originated from, to Europe and then the rest of the world via...
Oh, it's a West African thing?
Yeah, coffee itself comes from West Africa.
See, I don't know why, but my dumb little brain always thought that it was from South America.
And that's because there's
like Colombia.
the climate. Yeah. The climate in South America is very much so like the climate in West Africa is very much so like the climate in Indonesia.
Or even
those are three places where coffee is grown
for that matter,
in abundance.
Yeah. Okay.
So what does Weebly have to say about the history of caffeine? So some of this I just we already covered, but we'll go back over it just briefly. The word caffeine originated from the German word Kaff, and the French word café, both directly translated to mean coffee. So that's when they first isolated caffeine,
it was just called
they
coffee.
Just named it after, they just gave a chemical ending to the name coffee.
Oh, I see.
Right. Caffeine's chemical name, trimethylxanthine, based on its formula C8H10N4O2, and molecular structure. Caffeine is a naturally occurring stimulant that can be isolated from over 60 plants, but can also be made synthetically and added to our everyday food products and medications.
Instant coffee.
Much of modern population uses caffeine as a stimulant, exciting the brain and nervous system while fatigued. This makes caffeine one of the most widely consumed psychoactive agents in the world. Where does caffeine come from? Since caffeine and coffee are both derived from the Arabic word kawe, the origins of the word reflect the spread of coffee into Europe via Arabia and Turkey from southwest Africa, where coffee trees were cultivated as early as the 6th century.
Wow.
which is not that long ago, actually, if you think about
Yeah.
it. And we'll see that the history of psychoactive drugs in human culture goes back before written
Yeah, and again,
words.
My
So
my dumb little history brain actually didn't know that it went back that far. I thought it was like in the 1500s or something that we like pioneered it and found it, found it out. So
it wasn't until, so this is something that I've noticed is pretty typical for when you talk about the history of something. What you're really referring to, or what's really being referred to, is the white European history of something.
yeah,
Not the
Arabic, African,
not the Arabic or African, anybody who was brown history
Yeah.
of the thing. But
Thank God for European history.
right, well, if it wasn't for Arabia, we wouldn't even have math.
Pretty cool.
Where were we? The origins of the word reflect the spread of coffee into Europe via Arabia and Turkey from southwest Africa, where coffee trees were cultivated in the 6th century. Coffee began to be popular in Europe in the 17th century, so 1600s.
Oh, so it makes sense.
By the 18th century, plantations had been established in Indonesia, the West Indies, and by the 20th century, coffee had become the biggest cash crop on earth, which I think is something
God damn.
that no one really
By
thinks
what?
about.
By what year?
By the 1900s, by the 20th century,
God
coffee
damn.
was and is the largest cash crop on the planet. We are fucking smacked out on caffeine. The whole world is smacked out on caffeine.
Makes sense. We're like irrational and impulsive.
I just want everybody and the listeners to remember that bit, that little piece of information, that it is the largest cash crop, the largest, most productive plant grown on this planet.
That makes that money.
Makes that money. Caffeine was first isolated from coffee in 1819. It is also found in tea, in cocoa pods, and in cacao and chocolate properties, in cola nuts, used in the preparation of cola drinks. The ilex plant and the guarana seeds and other ingredients in energy drinks. The caffeine content of coffee bean varies according to the species of coffee plant beans. From coffee arabica, grown mostly in Central and South America, contain about 1.1% caffeine. Beans from coffee robusta, grown mostly in Indonesia and Africa, contain about twice that.
Wow.
Right. So
I'm buying the wrong coffee.
caffeine as a chemical, as a compound, was first extracted from cocoa beans in its purest form, a white powder. Not too surprising, because if you think about all the other alkaloid drugs that also show up as a white powder, like all of them almost.
Yeah.
In 1821, by a German scientist named Friedrich Ferdinand Runge. Today, caffeine is easily extracted and used to make a variety of products that are consumed on a daily basis. Extracting caffeine from coffee to produce decaffeinated coffee and caffeine powder can be accomplished in many different ways. A few of these processes, actually more than a few of them, are no longer used because of the health risks, environmental impact, costs, or flavor changes that were associated to the solvents that they were using to dissolve caffeine out of the beans. Common solvents that were used that are no longer used were chloroform, benzene.
Oh, benzene.
Benzene, yeah, that's a great one. Trichloroethylene, and dichloromethane. None of those sound like something that you want to actually like.
I don't want
heat
to
up
sip
and
any of
drink
those.
or
Yeah.
sip. There are now three main processes that have replaced the use of these previous solvents. Water extraction. They just basically steep the green.
They make coffee?
No, they take the raw, unroasted coffee beans and they soak them in water, and then
They use ice. Is it like bubble hash?
no, then they run that water through a charcoal filter, which removes the caffeine but doesn't take the flavor out of the beans. Then they dehydrate the beans, then re-soak them in the water that they had taken the caffeine out of. That's probably why decaffeinated coffee has that slightly not quite coffee flavor, even if
Yeah.
it's like water.
And I stand by my statement earlier. It is coffee that's been filtered through it. Like you've made coffee with these beans, filtered through it. Like you've made coffee with these beans, and now you're just selling them to people and being like, yeah, it still tastes like coffee, but it doesn't have as much caffeine.
Well, what they're doing is they're making green coffee, and then they're removing the caffeine from that liquid. Then they're reintroducing the liquid back to the bean and letting like the beans soak up the flavor that is still in the water.
Sounds like
It's just a really weird kind of way to do that. Another typical method is supercritical carbon dioxide extraction, which you may be familiar with. Was a popular way to make cannabis extracts for a while before we figured out how to legalize solvent extracting, because carbon dioxide is technically not a solvent, though at certain temperatures and pressures it does behave like a really awesome solvent.
yeah.
That basically just dissolves the caffeine out of the bean. And then the third method is just organic solvents that aren't illegal. So basically the old
Water.
way, but with just stuff that isn't considered to be caustic or carcinogenic or this, that, or the third. But I'm sure we'll find out later on is
Bacardi
really, really, really
151.
fucking horrible for you.
Bacardi 151.
So that's what Weebly had to say about the history of caffeine. I think it was kind of, it's got some interesting stuff, but it left me,
Desirous,
yeah, and I
which
think
might be a word that I invented.
desirous. Yes, it left me not feeling quite fulfilled about what my intended goal with this subject was. And it also felt like this was just sort of like the white European history of coffee, not even caffeine.
Yeah.
Cafe.
And just the chemical understanding of the drug caffeine, which is in its own right interesting, and at the time in Europe and in much of the world, chemistry was sort of on the chemical science was this sort of rock star thing that was occurring. We're reaching sort of the end of the enlightened period, if you will. People, this after the Dark Ages, humans decided that they were allowed to learn shit again, and all sorts of interesting things began happening. So by the 1820s, we hadn't quite got to the modern era, but we were almost there. We're in the Industrial Revolution, certainly. Like, we've harnessed steam, and so chemistry was like one of these cutting edge fields.
People
I mean,
were
it
like,
still
"Oh,
is.
we can actually do shit with technology that changes how water exists, that can push a train
Right.
along tracks."
Right.
And then they were like, "What else can we do?"
Right. Chemistry was building on the back of other sciences to make things available to all people, all demographics. It was improving everyone's life dramatically in a lot of ways. Now,
Most of the time.
most of the time, for sure. And like I know with you, we talked the other day about I think it was you. I talked about Mary Curie and like the importance of her discovery and discovering radioactivity and radioactive decay and like two elements.
I was just going to bring up, though, that there was a lot of, how do you put it, like unregulated usage of new discoveries.
Oh, yeah.
So
The 1900s was a wasteland.
Somebody would come up with something, and Mary Curie being an example of that and stuff, discovers something new, but it's not owned, or it's not restricted, if you will, and stuff. So everybody,
it's not even understood.
like, take back in the Western days when everybody was selling mercury as some cure-all for every possible thing you could think of.
With
you know?
mercury and red flannel.
Yeah,
Well, and
exactly.
now there's a great Chuck Palahniuk book that really talks about it, and I can't remember the name of it, but in it they're talking about the main character is talking to this lawyer, and this lawyer works for this big pharmaceutical company, and what they're doing is they're just throwing patents on any name that you can have for any kind of like we'll say shoulder pain, and it's like shoulder therapy or thera shoulder, like any name that they can
This
think
is like
of
the
that associate.
.com snatch up.
Exactly,
Where, like,
yeah.
Once that guy invented the algorithm that could generate names, like and it just started like companies bought it from him and just like trademarked every fucking conceivable name in these this chunk, and that's where you got like GoDaddy who consolidated all that shit.
And
GoDaddy literally owns the rights to all those different .com names. That's how they are able to do that.
Well,
because you literally have to go to them and be like, yeah, I want to buy that from you.
And that was my question about like guaranine.
Yeah,
like I was really curious to see if guaranine was just like the Tylenol of aspirin. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's not like
or the Kleenex of nose tissues.
It's not So like acetaminophen is the generic drug name. So is the trimethylxanthine is the generic name for caffeine.
Mm-hmm.
Caffeine really, in a sense, refers to that drug in coffee, but it's become like Kleenex. You know,
where now we just
Kleenex.
We
need
associate
any kind of
together.
tissue paper, right?
Or Band-Aid.
Band-Aid. I need a Band-Aid, not a bandage, right? Adhesive bandage. That's what they're technically called, right? You go to get the CVS brand. It's the CVS adhesive bandages.
Yeah.
So
cannabis weed, and we call it Bubba Kush. Cannabis sativa. You know, it's really interesting because we have all these scientific names too. That was the point that I was trying to reach. Like these scientific things that's like, you guys know what goat heads are?
The fucking those things you step on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I stepped on one yesterday.
There's a scientific name for them, but we all know them as goat heads.
Yeah.
And so the interesting thing about that marketing technique is that they turn the idea of a goat head, which we know and love, they just patent that name, and they're like, "This is our product now. We are Kleenex." So anytime, and the weird thing about that is that not only did they patent the name, but somehow it became like common language, like how we have. The common goat head, which has its like, Asophilus sentative, its Latin name,
right.
We call it goat head. They did the same thing, but then they were like, we're gonna make people call it fucking Kleenex. It's a pretty interesting technique actually, because it kind of it's turning their brand name into a common name for something.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Household.
Genius. Yeah.
So here we are, 1820s. There's all this really kind of interesting, there's tons of really interesting chemistry and scientific endeavors happening. People are learning all sorts of new things because of the abilities granted to them by the Industrial Revolution to create new devices by which to test scientific ideas.
That's what I was going to say.
So much of science is actually proving the idea that you have, and so much of like where we have been held back by science is literally just not having a way, the technology to test the thing. It wasn't until 20 years ago we had the science to test for this type of particle that flies through the fucking universe.
Yeah.
And you have to actually, set up the testing array inside a gold mine.
Or magnetic waves.
That's where it's like protected from all the other particles that fly around in the universe. And then you can sense it.
The one thing I like about science when you come to scientific discoveries and stuff is the term theory is something that is believed to be true until it's proven wrong. Which means that even in science, they're like, this is the best we can come up with, and based on what we have to use, let's say, it cannot be proven wrong. And we've seen many examples, I can't prove right now.
Actually, I like a theory is something that we haven't proved entirely, right? So you have a theory based on some evidence,
That's what I'm
and
saying.
then you have to prove your theory, and if you can't prove your theory, it doesn't go any further.
Well, that's
Yeah,
what
it's
I'm
like
getting
having
at. So
having an equation, and then you can prove that all this stuff equals humans have a gravitational
Well,
pull
that's
from
what
the
I- and
Earth
that's
by
what I-
this, but you have this exponent in there, the x in this
Well,
equation,
and
where you're like, that's
what I'm getting at, though. Is so you present an idea that you can prove based on what you have, and nobody can disprove it. So it's a theory. It
Yeah,
can be
it becomes more
disproven, and this
concrete.
is what I was getting at. I like about it is as time goes on, and we come up with new technology on things like you were saying, it has to be put in here, or we look at it this way, or something like that. We can rediscover that this theory was wrong, but at the time it was completely right because that was as far as we could prove it. If that makes
a
sense.
good analogy for that is is kind of like a computer way of like doing code, and it's like if this equals this, then this and this and this and this have to be true. And so what it does is it allows the computer to run a code to generate something that's going on.
Well, that's just
and that's
just
what
if-
you're describing.
That's
Is
an and or stop gate,
well, no, it's a if this equals
or
this.
if and logic gate, or whatever.
That's what
logic
it is.
gate, not stop gate.
Yeah, and that's what's so interesting about it too is that like we can change the if this part. Because if this part is wrong, then we can recode the rest of this computer, and that's where I think you were trying to touch on that.
Yeah.
Science is so interesting because science will just randomly grab up if this equals this, and be like, no, actually, we've disproven this, and we've got to reanalyze this whole chain of belief. And yeah, sorry to tangent, Sam.
No worries. This might actually be a pretty good point to take a break. What's our time at, bro? Yeah, let's just take a break right here, and then we'll get back to it and get into the second part of this.
Sounds good.
Story about caffeine.
Like
the history of caffeine.
I've learned
the secrets about caffeine.
I've learned
it gets pretty interesting, actually, and by the end of this, I think that if you're like me, you're going to be going like, I have even more questions about caffeine. And hopefully we can provide our listeners with some places to find some answers at least.
Or we can send them to the almighty God Google, which is where we're going to go for a few minutes.
Yes.
As we take this break. And now, a word from our fake sponsors that we made up for your entertainment.
Mechanics Anonymous, fixing your bad habits since 1993.
Rattlesnakes and Rednecks, family owned and operated. The United Antifa Calamari Liberation Front. Visit us at uaclf.inc.
AFAD, the Anti-Federalists Against Defamation. Grab our brochure at your local library for more information.
Wopsie Vasilla on Drivers Against Drunk Drummers, funded by Mothers of Motorcyclists. Thanks, Mom and Dad!
The Flattern Foundation. Check out why Saturn is flat at theflatternfoundation.edu.
Hancock, Humphreys, Pinfield and Pike Cartography Company has been making scientifically accurate maps since 2005 and business is booming. Since introducing our three-dimensional pop-up book maps, we've been able to pioneer a new way to bring you the comfort, nostalgia and smell of your grandfather's old atlases. Come see the world in 3 awesome dimensions with Hancock, Humphreys, Pinfield and Pike Cartography Company's Old Granddad's 3-dimensional Virgin Paper Pop-Up Atlas. Volumes 1 through 15,000.
This podcast was brought to you by Fourth Corner, supporting independent entertainment, music, and no-pants parties in the Trinity County area since 2016.
And now, back to the Black Sheep and Bad Apples podcast. Oh, liquid salt. We are back, Black Sheep and Bad Apples, and Sam is taking the lead.
Give me them reins.
Give me them reins. First of all, good episode. Really liking it.
Nice, thank you.
I'm eager to digest more.
Me as
And,
well. I'm eager to explain more about the interesting and diverse world of caffeine.
Feed me caffeine.
Sean, you want to make some coffee?
It blessed the rains down in Africa.
So where were we? We were talking about how that Weebly article was really just the white man's history of coffee, and that as interesting as the 1800s were for scientific advancement, especially in the fields of chemistry, you know, it was kind of you know, like almost romantic era in science. You brought up this idea that like people really didn't understand the risks. There was not a lot of oversight and regulation.
Yeah.
And so like all sorts of wild things happened with chemical discoveries, with scientific discoveries, where people would just like, oh, that's something new. We're gonna use radium to cure
Treat
baldness.
everything. Yeah.
Right, you know, and so like a whole generation of bald men spread literally radioactive goo on their heads.
It's
and
like how
after-
some people nowadays use industrial bleach still, and they could just call it miracle mineral solution.
Radium.
It's pretty weird.
Yeah, like no one should ever use bleach.
Or industrial bleach. Like the name industrial should imply that it's more badass than
you
regular
remember
bleach.
Jeff that came to our Napa Valley show and got way too high?
Oh.
So he works in
Oh, yeah, I do.
Sidetrack. He works in like the valve, like big refinery valve industry. He's a valve tech and he does other stuff like that. And he was working at a plant that made bleach. And Sean is literally sneezing himself
He's
to death.
sneezing himself to death.
And
Solvent.
it's the solvent.
It's the solvent.
It's the bleach. So they
Told you not to shoot it in your nose.
there was an accident
Took
with
too
the
much
bleach,
radium.
and this guy got his arm doused with pure bleach,
Hell no.
Pretty cool.
and he was wearing some mild protective layer that
didn't
the
work.
bleach instantaneously ate through, and his arm melted off to the
What?
bone before they could get like a counter agent
Yeah.
on it. And so he's telling me this story, and he's like, you know where they keep the big fiberglass tanks of bleach? Right next to the shipping, like where the trucks come through, and there's like a Jersey barrier. So if something went wrong and one of the trucks
If like a
bumped-
molasses spill happened,
That's what I was going to
bumped-
say. It sounds like a molasses
bumped
accident.
into this container, 55,000 gallons of pure bleach would spill into the parking lot. Kind of, you know. So
Pretty
people,
cool.
this
you know
is
where
just
a good place to put a sugar factory is?
demonstration. Yeah,
In the middle of a big city.
yeah, no.
Yeah.
turns out that's a bad idea.
Super
With
bad.
molasses.
You know why the flour mills were always located outside of town? Because flour mills will fucking explode.
Yeah?
Like a coal mine, coal dust will
Actually,
explode.
little side tangent. I had a teacher who was like, "Does anybody in here think that this was chemistry day?" And he was like, "Does anybody in here think that flour that you use for cooking is flammable?" And everybody was like, "I mean, not really. I'm sure if you got it hot enough." He was like, "Yeah, you're right." And he lit a match and stuck it down to it, and the match went out. And he was like, "But check this out." And he just dumped some fucking flour into this baby baby powder.
Baby powder thing, yeah.
Yeah, and he fucking took this Bunsen burner and lit it up, and then woof, and it
Right.
woof lit
Right.
up.
Right.
Yeah,
Right. So that's what, flour does that. And so, like, flour
coffee
mills.
creamer. You ever seen that fun?
No.
Oh, you
we
take
were getting way
dry-
distracted on this.
Yeah,
Sorry.
dry coffee creamer, same thing. It's like the flour. If you take powdered coffee creamer and pour it over a flame, it will light like no other.
Bro, you remember when we found that the recipe for making your own model rockets?
Oh
Do
yeah.
you remember what it was? It was stump remover.
Yep. and
sugar.
Sugar, yeah.
Right, and you powderized both of them and mixed them together. And I actually found another recipe where you put that powder on a double boiler and you make it a liquid and you pour it in. It's called cotton candy fuel.
All right, so guys, we're gonna edit out that part because we don't need to be.
This podcast, when I put it on the YouTube, is not made for children.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, definitely, but I'm saying like that might be.
This is
It's
stuff
not the
you can
Anarchist cookbook.
This is
This
stuff
is
you can
something you can
easily
look up on
Google and
Google.
that people
Yeah.
do all the time
All
to
right.
make their own model rocket engines.
Well, we'll see if we're keeping it in.
But my point is that sugar is a carbohydrate. A carbohydrate is almost a hydrocarbon. Hydrocarbons are just carbohydrates that have sat in the ground for a fucking long ass time, to some degree or another. So of course they burn.
Yeah.
We literally burn them inside our body to produce ATP that moves our muscles and all of our functions. ATP. So where were we? We were talking about the golden age of chemistry, so to speak. This heady time in science where people didn't have restrictions or limitations in the way that we do now. And you couldn't do a lot of the stuff that they were experimenting on nowadays because we know how dangerous or toxic they can be, so they become much, much, much more expensive. People were just building upon this like 5,000 year history of intellectual pursuit, and they were doing it at this fantastical rate because the world was getting smaller and smaller. We now had railroads that crossed whole continents. We had harnessed the power of steam. We didn't yet have electrical telegraph like what we think of as like Morse code telegraph.
Yeah.
But we had optical telegraphs and these systems of towers stretched across the Europe, where every 5 to 20 miles there's a tower, and they used lights and these funny swinging arms. That was invented by a guy named Claude Chappé in 1792, and had a lot to do with why Napoleonic France expanded so far outside its own borders, because this type of communication system that this guy invented. But this isn't what I'm like really obsessed with. I love these things, but what I was really looking for in the history of caffeine was this swerve moment, this thing where this moment where everything changes drastically going forward in human history. I know I talk about it a lot. I call it the swerve. It's not a phrase I coined. It was coined by the author Stephen Greenblatt in his book The Swerve, or How the World Became Modern, which is a really, really, really great read that I suggest anybody to read, because it demonstrates how something that any of us did today, some idea or concept that we might come up with today, even if it doesn't grab any traction today, might not mature into its own for 1,000 years or more. And because that's what the book is about. It's about a book hunter who found a copy of Lucretius's On the Nature of Things at the start of the Enlightenment, and he knew there was something important about this book, and so he made copies of it, and he spread those copies around to people, academic people, who then took this Roman philosopher's idea about what it means to scientifically endeavor towards a goal. This is the basis of our idea of like scientific, like how to test something scientifically.
Like the scientific method.
The scientific method, thank you. Came from this guy Lucretius.
Scientists got organized.
Right. So you see this swerve.
Scientists organized, hell yeah. Formed a union, would you call it?
So that's what I was looking for in caffeine. Like where was the swerve?
The pivot point.
In the history of caffeine, where was it that caffeine came into our societies and changed them?
Yeah.
Like Mother Jones is in a way a hinge pin to one of those moments in our
How things took a swing in a different
social
direction.
our social ideology, right?
Almost folklore.
In a way.
Yeah.
So I'm really obsessed with those moments. So like I was really looking for where is that moment in caffeine, not coffee, not just coffee, but caffeine, because that's obviously been around and on every continent for much longer than humans have been around.
Mm-hmm.
Plants don't use caffeine to
get high.
To get high, they use caffeine as a poison to keep bugs away and to inhibit the
Stupid
growth.
plants.
The reason that it's in seeds is to inhibit the growth of other plants around the seed, so that seed might have an advantage for gaining altitude to get light. That's what caffeine is doing. It has nothing to do with our psycho active brains, right?
Yeah.
So I was like, thank you, Weebly. That was interesting. Let's go a little more like black and white. Let's Wikipedia that shit and see what Wikipedia has to say. Wikipedia obviously has lots of interesting things to say about caffeine. It's a really highly examined molecule. It's the largest cash crop in the world. There's obviously a lot of money to like research caffeine, so there's a lot of interesting stuff just about caffeine itself. And so we'll just go to the Wikipedia page, and I'll kind of hit on some of my favorite parts. Where'd you go? There you are. So some interesting things that I noticed in just the data, the pharmacological data on caffeine that's available, which doesn't much have to do with the history or necessarily a swerve event, but like in adults, caffeine lasts about 3 to 7 hours in total till you've eliminated its half-life. In an infant human, it lasts 65 to 130 hours.
Wow.
What about
So if you are breastfeeding and you drink some coffee and your baby even just gets a small amount of that, it's going to stay to some degree. Some of the things that the metabolites, the things that it breaks down into, those chemicals that it breaks down into, are going to stay in the baby's bloodstream for up to 130 hours. That's a long time.
Yeah.
And so you can see that if you did that a couple times a day, you'd slowly build up a pretty large amount of those chemicals.
Where did ADHD come from?
Inside
I
it.
drink a lot of coffee when my...
I was high as fuck.
Let's get down here.
Yeah, and that's a really insane thing, an insane thought, just because it's like what I've heard. It's like from 2 to 12 hours is the general amount that caffeine really has its hold on you. But when you multiply that by like having a smaller, like less functional
body
metabolism,
system, right? Metabolism.
Yeah, you like the math really does start to add up
Well,
pretty quickly.
Right. So caffeine itself is eliminated from your bloodstream in like 2 to 4 hours.
Mm-hmm.
It's the metabolite, the things that it breaks down into, that your body breaks it down into, that stick around longer because they are more like the chemicals I think that are in your body.
Mm-hmm.
Don't quote me on that. So there's a bunch of really interesting, sciencey, nerdy, technical data, obviously on Wikipedia about caffeine itself. But what I was really interested in was the history of caffeine, and I found a nice little history section on the Wikipedia page, which gets away from just coffee and talks about all the sorts of instances of caffeine in human society. So we're going to go through that.
Fun.
So, according to Chinese legend, the Chinese emperor Shennong, reputed to have reigned in about 3000 BCE, so like about 5,000 years ago, inadvertently discovered tea when he noted that when certain leaves fell into boiling water, a fragrant and restorative drink resulted. Now, this is lore. There's no archaeological evidence to support this.
When what leaves?
When
Just
when
some
certain
leaves.
certain
Oh,
leaves,
just certain leaves. Okay.
leaves
okay.
from a tea tree,
Yeah, that's how I was like. Okay,
Right.
there's certain leaves. So you found out specific leaves by
Right.
folklore
right?
made a difference. Yeah.
And really, there's not a lot, like we don't have like a
And then he discovered poison oak and died.
right. There's no real archaeological evidence to support this. Is apparently this emperor was mentioned by Lu Yu's Cha Jing, a famous early work on the subject of tea. But we're not going to get too far into that because this is, to me, it's just lore, and whatever just one guy wrote about
Yeah, definitely.
doesn't necessarily.
That's not
It's
necessarily
not-
history.
Yeah, it's someone's interpretation
It's
of.
by story.
Right, and when we look through history, we look for multiple texts corroborating an event before we start to even like
Otherwise, it's a
look at
telephone
it.
game.
Yeah,
Right.
and that could be just somebody like fluffing their king's feathers or
Right,
whatever. Like he
right.
discovered tea.
So the earliest credible evidence of either coffee drinking or knowledge of the coffee plant appears in the middle of the 15th century in the Sufi monasteries of the Yemen in southern Arabia. From Mocha, coffee spread to Egypt and North Africa, and by the 16th century it had reached the rest of Middle East, Persia, Turkey, from there, blah, blah, blah. We already know it got to Europe, right? And from Europe, the Dutch East India Company
That's
took
what I was
it
gonna say.
took it to the East Indies and to the Americas.
the trade route hit it, and then it.
Right, and this
like,
is how is
really-
why you have Indonesian and all these Southeast
Well,
Asian.
they used to spread spices, everything else. So when I can
Right,
only imagine when
right.
the coffee bean hit the trade market, it was
and
a hot commodity.
you're talking about something that actually takes a lot of space to create a very small amount of stuff.
And for the British,
You-
they already
it's-
have tea. This is like tea on crack.
But that's what I was gonna say. When you're making space for drugs, though, there's always more space than you should have.
Right.
They're like, we got a little bit of this, a little bit of that.
Right.
You know, some tea. We got some of this.
Well, and it also makes sense.
What about the coffee? Yeah, we got a whole billow for that. You know,
It
like-
also so Africa, West Africa especially, is very close to Europe.
Yeah,
right? So you can transport coffee from West Africa to Europe, but it's not very close to India, and it's not very close to
Buy low,
the
sell
Americas.
Yeah.
Right. So it would make sense to have these drugs being grown in all those places so that you don't spend so much on transportation costs. They still owned all the plantations. They still
Yeah.
owned all the coffee. So
But now they don't have to pay people as much.
right, which is definitely their gig. So the cola nut use appears to have ancient origins. It is chewed in many West African cultures in both private and social settings to restore vitality and ease hunger pains. The earliest evidence of cocoa bean use comes from residue found in ancient Mayan pot, an ancient Mayan pot dated to 600 BCE. Also, chocolate was consumed in a bitter and spicy drink called oxalotl. I believe I'm
Wait,
saying that right.
600 BCE? God damn.
Right. Often seasoned with vanilla, chili pepper, and achiote. You'd probably pronounce that better than me, but sorry for slaughtering your language, whosever's language I just slaughtered.
Very
So-
sensitive of you.
Oxalol was believed to fight fatigue. I believe probably attributed to the theobromine and caffeine content of the cocoa bean. Chocolate was an important luxury throughout pre-Columbian Mesoamerica, and cocoa beans were often used as currency. This drink was introduced to Europe by the Spaniards and became a popular beverage by the 1700s. Spaniards also introduced the coca tree to the West Indies and the Philippines. It was used in alchemical processes where it was known as black bean.
Wait.
So
I don't like that because I love black beans.
Right. It's
I
not
don't-
frijo negro.
I don't want to ever go to Taco Bell and get a black bean, cheesy bean and rice burrito.
And it's just hard
and
ass
it's just
cocoa beans.
hard ass cocoa beans. I would be pissed. Not. I wouldn't.
of
It's like when
I
people
wouldn't
think
return it.
when people think
I'd still
cocoa
eat it.
nibs are like chocolate, and
Yeah.
they're like and they bite them, and they're just hard as a fucking rock. It's
Or
that's not how. It
Or
works.
like Baker's chocolate when you're a kid.
Baker's chocolate is at least chocolate. Cocoa nibs are just crushed up bean, and
Oh,
you
I
use
didn't
them
know that.
for like cooking. Not they're used to add flavor without adding cocoa powder.
I see.
I'm not really sure what the difference is.
Crushed up bean.
So the leaves and stems of the Yaupon holly, also known as Ilex vomitoria, were used by Native Americans to brew a tea called acai, or the black drink. Archaeologists have found evidence of this used far into antiquity, probably dating to late archaic times.
You think you could market that drink today? The black drink, and it's like this yerba mate style, but it's just a black caffeinated
Actually,
beverage.
Facebook has been trying to feed me this. It's called like Mountain Death or Liquid Death or Death Drink or something like that. And it's like we make hard ass commercials and hard ass coffees. And like I haven't clicked on the link 'cause it's Facebook, but I think people are trying to market that.
It's just the name.
I'll have to look into it.
It just
Yeah,
sounds
black
like,
drink.
A black drink, and it's
Y'all
just
want
like,
black drink?
Wow.
So obviously, like people have been using caffeine for a while.
Yeah.
Sounds like it's a pretty OG drug for sure.
Right, and it would stand to reason if archaeologically. So here's the problem I think with finding, like you'll find oil-based drug residues much longer after you would find water-soluble
Yeah.
drug residues.
Yeah.
So finding stuff that's got the residue of caffeine still in it is difficult. Finding archaeological
Evidence for that.
chemical evidence of caffeine is hard if water has washed over that area anytime.
I was gonna
Whereas
say,
like opiums and like things that are actually oil based will, THC, hash stuff, cannabis products and opiates are going to be in a piece of pottery
yeah.
far longer.
Or you're talking BC though, like
That's a lot of years.
that's a lot of years between now and then.
Well, just wait,
Or-
because this made me think. Well, like, how long have we? Where do
That's-
we see the archaeological evidence of the use?
That's what I
And
was.
how far back can we actually
Okay,
go?
and that's what I was gonna kind of go is like, what is the more so the credible evidence, if you will, based like chemicals over that a lot of time is going to be a little questionable and stuff, but we can start to pick up some characteristics and other things that's like, oh no, this is based on type of deal. So yeah, go on.
So I found this interesting Wired.com little, whatever article entitled "Archaeologists Find 900-Year-Old Cup of Tea."
Ooh.
Okay.
Right.
Should we take a sip?
I mean, I might try this. So
Yeah. I was gonna say, I
So
might-
ceramics. I'm just going to read the article because that makes the most sense. It's not very long. Ceramic mugs discovered outside of St. Louis suggest a vast American trade network flourished centuries before Christopher Columbus landed in the New World. So here we're going to see like not just that caffeine was being used into this antiquity, but also that its use shows a much more complex culture
yeah.
There's a
Existing-
history behind it.
existing. It helps to prove that, yet again, white people are just assholes and wrong.
and addicted
You mean
to
we
drugs.
didn't discover it in the 15th century?
So
I find that hard to believe.
this article is by Elizabeth Norton, and I think it was first published in Science Now. In the 1600s, Europeans exploring the American Southeast wrote of a purification ritual practiced by the native people involving dancing, vomiting, and large amounts of what travelers called black drink. Served from shell cups, the highly caffeinated tea was brewed from the shrub Ilex vomitoria, a species of holly. In a new study, researchers have found the first direct evidence of black drink, not in shells from Florida or Mississippi, but in ceramic beakers at an ancient city of Cahokia, outside of what is now St. Louis, Missouri. The finding hints at a trade network that flourished centuries before Christopher Columbus landed in the New World, in which caffeinated drinks had, I don't like this, but had Starbucks-like importance and possibly religious significance.
When?
I would not have compared Starbucks to religion, but we now know that Elizabeth Norton has some weird priority things going on.
And the logo is kind of a weird, like, modern art version of, like, the Mother Mary.
Yeah.
Right. So
she's got an uncomfortable relationship with coffee, it sounds like.
Yeah.
So Cahokia sprang up almost overnight around 1050 CE and vanished almost as abruptly 300 years later. In the meantime, it was the largest and most sophisticated metropolis north of Mexico.
God damn.
According to the archaeological evidence, the central part of the city covered about 14 square kilometers. That's no shit.
Jesus Christ.
That's no shit for a culture of people
bunch
who are
of
supposed to be
savages?
fucking savages.
Yeah.
Okay?
Jesus
That's a
fucking
city.
Christ.
That's bigger than Hayfork.
Yeah, that's insane.
That's like more houses than Hayfork.
And again, it's crazy to think that like
And we have
some of the beliefs that we think of are like people people living in teepees, and there's like 400 of them, and it's like no, it sounds like there was a small metropolis.
It made it larger than London was at the time.
God damn.
It's bigger than London when it existed. The 15,000 inhabitants built a wooden version of Stonehenge that charted eclipses. A stockade surrounding the city could be dismantled and rearranged according to an invader's position. This is very well thought out. Like, this is something that people who are drinking fucking caffeine do. Not a bunch of, like,
It's
teetotalers. I guess that's the wrong term. But
yeah, no, it's like when people get high on coke, but like they're rational. So that instead of being like, we should start a business selling CDs in 2020,
caffeine
like,
literally is like rational cocaine.
Yeah,
they're both alkaloid drugs.
They're like, they're like, we should build a catapult, which I don't know if they were doing that, but we should build a catapult and think about it. It's like throwing 30 stones all at once.
So what happened is, unlike cocaine, you try and convince everybody, and some people are like, yeah, some people are like, no, and it's kind of indifferent around the table. You're either into it or you're not. Like, anybody want some coffee? Everybody's hand at the table goes up. And now they're fanatically working on shit like this because
that's
now...
a great idea!
Yeah, okay, well, break it down. Let's go through this. And we're really, like, now you're expanding knowledge right now. It's like, you can't convince everybody to do cocaine. Otherwise, they'd come up with brilliant ideas. And we were like, damn it, they did this on cocaine now.
No, I think if you're a really charismatic leader, coffee is just going to get you going.
But
if you're talking to people who are listening, and you're like, we should build a bridge here, and they're like high as shit too. They're like, yeah, we could do that in like 4 days, dude. We could do that in 4 days. Like, I think it could work.
I'm just like, it seems like that worldly, like, hey, everybody want to do cocaine and do an idea and make an idea up, and everybody's like,
but it's like
I don't know if that's the best idea.
It's like
but
juvenile
it's like,
cocaine.
hey, you want to stay up all night drinking coffee and finish this shit, and everybody's like, fuck yeah.
Well, we just gotta. So just interesting on its own, that this hunt for like the history of caffeine kind of led me to some really cool and new information about something that's just not common knowledge and probably should be.
Yeah.
So this excavation site yielded distinctly patterned mug-shaped beakers. Archaeologist Patricia Crown of the University of New Mexico, Albuquerque, and her colleagues were analyzing fragments of these beakers sent by Thomas Emerson and Timothy Pucketat two archaeologists
Sorry,
from the
Punta.
University of Illinois who were working on this dig site. The beakers contained residue presumed to be chocolate because we knew already that South Americans traded in this chocolate drink, and it was a delicacy and a mildly religious sort of sacrament. But although the chemical signatures showed traces of caffeine, they did not match up with those of cacao, chocolate's main ingredient. The Cahokia team wondered whether the beakers had contained black drink instead. Now, but where that bush grows, it just grows along the Gulf of Mexico. It doesn't grow in fucking St. Louis, Missouri.
Okay.
Its only known habitat is hundreds and hundreds of miles away.
So they were smuggling it in.
Right.
Which wasn't smuggling because there was no borders back then.
Right.
Because fuck ice.
Since shell cups like those in the southeast had been found in whatever. Some archaeologists
Nailed it.
suspected that traders might have brought the purifying brew to the city as well. But because holly leaves don't survive to be found in archaeological digs, and analytical methods could not distinguish among sources of caffeine, it wasn't clear just what the Cahokians had been drinking. To find out, Crown teamed up with biochemist and chocolate expert W. Jeffrey Hurst.
Imagine having that job, chocolate expert.
Well, listen, of the Hershey Foods Technical Center in Pennsylvania.
Oh my god.
So this is like Hershey's chocolate dude, right? It's their chocolate guy.
The guy.
The guy. Hurst had previously identified a chemical called theobromine that is found in chocolate. Research had also shown that holly plants contained a compound called ursolic acid, which is not found in chocolate. So if you can imagine, what they found was that this acid was present, indicating that it was the holly leaves and not oxalotl.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
Right? So, using this profile, they showed that the beakers of the Cahokia had indeed contained black drink 400 kilometers from the nearest holly plant and 500 years before Europeans described the brew in their journals.
So they would go some distance, like all people with drugs. They're like, yeah, my local dude's out, but there is one like 400 kilometers away.
He's
and
on
you're
his
like,
way.
yeah, can he be cool and like, when I get there?
Yeah, you're like,
And they're like,
how
well,
long
that's
till
all-
your next shipment, man? And he's like, I don't know, he's coming down from down there.
Yeah. We got a hookup on that. He's coming from down south. Some of that fire.
Some of that fire. Hey, have you ever had...
And this one dude
Black
shows
drink?
up with like huge amounts of it and gets paid dirt cheap. And it's like, well, that's what it is.
Yeah. Anyway, well, it's about time for us to take a small break, so I think we're going to
Oh, it is.
chop into
Look
it.
at that. Please enjoy these commercials.
And elevator music. Mary and Antoinette's Exotic Sweetbread Bakery and Butcher Shop. We've been open on and off since Mom went to prison. Starting as a household necessity, we converted that into a business where we strive to serve some of the finest and most exotic meats that there are, including capybara, cassowary, hyena, and starfish.
Also available, fresh baked breads hand delivered daily between the hours of 3 and 5 from Ma's Prison Kitchen.
Daily sweetbread specials include sea pig sweetbread, alligator sweetbread, albatross sweetbread, and occasionally long pig.
Located in the Whispering Pines Trailer Park Food Court off of Highway 76, Bill Street, exit 47, left at the Texaco, then a right a half a mile past the Bill Murray Memorial Park next to the bridge. If you hit the clam, you've gone too far.
Brought to you by Toxic Positivity. The personal bubble. Maintain 6 feet spacing at all times with the personal bubble. Powered by the same technology behind airbags, the personal bubble is here to keep you safe.
No more unwanted hugs, smelling the breath of someone talking uncomfortably close to you, or explanation of your personal space with the personal bubble.
Just attach it to your belt, brooch, or shirt sleeves. Set the sensors, and your personal bubble is secure.
Buy your personal bubble today. Available on eBay, Craigslist, or Facebook store at My Personal Bubble.
AFAD, the Anti-Federalists Against Defamation. Grab our brochure at your local library for more information. We all know banana bread is fucking hell yeah, bro.
Hell yeah, bro!
It's been established as the best kind of bread and banana by the Bread and Banana Bureau.
Bro.
We thought that since banana bread, what we affectionately refer to as BB, is so important, we'd set up banana bread stands by bringing BB to your work.
Oh, hell yeah.
By bringing banana bread to better your busted break time, we're making sure that every customer gets to have a rad time.
Bro.
When you get paid not that much money for doing a whole lot of work, bro, call the Bananas Berries Bros Bread Co.
Okay. Bananas are berries. Why is it bananas? And
Yeah, but
it's like
the
oak.
company is called
Bro,
Bananas
it's
and
like-
Berries
it's like
Bros
Oak
Bread.
and Wood Company.
No,
Like,
but it's called the Bananas and Bros Berries.
I'm
It's called the
just
Bananas
saying,
and Berries
bro.
Bros Bread Co.
Bro.
It doesn't
And
make-
I'm
it's
just,
not, bro.
I'm just
It's
saying,
not con-
I'm just saying,
it
like,
doesn't make-
Stop the violence!
sorry, dude.
We can all agree the banana bread at work is like, hell yeah, bro.
Hell yeah, bro. The Bananas and Berries Bros Bread Co. We all have that friend who needs a hand every now and again. Sometimes we are that friend. When you're out at a burger place and you forget your wallet, it's nice to have somebody to offer help during that social situation. But we've all had someone take advantage of that kindness. Perhaps we've also had a friend who constantly needs that social grace.
Introducing Friendship Debt Collectors!
Friendship Debt Collectors offers a hand in getting reimbursed for your kindnesses.
Are you irritated with your friends not being able to pay back your quid pro quo expectations?
We're here to make sure that you get the money you're owed.
Whether it's $2 or $22
The Friendship Debt Collectors are here to help you.
for a small fee.
Thank you for listening to our fake sponsors. If you like what you've heard, like, subscribe, and share. It all helps. Now back to the show. Welcome to the beta version of Black Sheep and Bad Apples. Just kidding, but we're back talking about caffeine. Sam.
Yeah, what's up, guys?
Oh,
What do we-
yeah.
Various states of inebriation.
Various states. I am 2 spliffs in and 2 beers in. I had a drink before this, which was gin and lemon juice. So
Gym and juice.
gin and juice. Yeah, I'm doing pretty good.
I-
Gym and juice.
I had some wedding cake, and I think I realized that you shouldn't save that cake that long.
Yeah, definitely.
or ever get married.
But that's debatable. But
Well, he did
different
put it
podcast.
in his joint and smoke it. So before we continue,
Oh,
Sam,
yeah.
how is your inebriance?
I'm I'm pretty good. I'm a
I'm
little stoned. I've had a
hella
couple
inebriated.
beers. I'm not as high as Sean is. That's for sure.
Higher than fucking bat pussy over here. So, do you want to?
Yes, where were we? We just talked about this black drink archaeological excavation.
the black drink.
The black
The
drink.
black drink.
North America's very own high potency caffeine source, the Ilex vomitoria. And I had found somewhere, and I don't remember where it was. I thought it was going to come up in that Wired article, but
Bad source.
apparently, the reason that this holly is named vomitoria is because the first people who saw it, like the first white people who saw its use, witnessed people vomiting from something else.
Oh.
And in probably something like peyote or a different
Doing some
Some kind of
other-
herb.
psychedelic.
Yeah.
So this was like, I'm going to give you a crazy downer. Here's a little upper to go with it.
Or
And
something.
then-
I
and
mean,
then
it
they
was
witnessed them
they
like,
were witnessing
the
ritualistic
ayahuasca is
ceremony
like, "Wah."
that didn't just involve
Yeah,
drinking
yeah.
this tea from this leaf, but other things as well. So I have one more. I have one more article that's I just found. I thought was very interesting. When I was really just digging deeper for anything more about like archaeological history of caffeine. And what I found was an article by the Huff Post. Hold your booze.
All right. We'll huff post it then. Not
Called-
my favorite source, but
Humans have been getting high since prehistoric times, research shows by Markrina Cooper Whites.
let me
Markrina
take a look.
Cooper
Let me
Whites.
take a look. Yeah, it's like Macrina Cooper. Cooper White.
Markrina.
Macarena.
It's spelled like that.
So
Say
we could
with
just
some
do without
attitude.
the little intro and skip right to like what a doctor had to say and,
Blah,
and
blah,
not
blah,
what like
blah, blah, blah.
Blah,
Doctor
blah, blah,
said-
blah,
blah, blah.
Doctor said this thing.
now that's a trip. Haha, very funny. Quote, it is generally thought that mind-altering substances, or at least drugs, are a modern-day issue, but if we look at the archaeological records, there are many data supporting their consumption in
Good
prehistoric
writing,
times.
Macarena.
Dr. Elisa Guerradose, an associate professor of prehistory at the University of Valladolid in Spain, and
Ooh.
author of the review, told the Huffington Post in an email, as soon as drug plants and fermented drinks were first consumed, there is uninterrupted evidence for such use over centuries, and occasionally the relationship that began in prehistoric times has continued into present day.
Hell yeah! So they're saying basically like drugs once they were introduced have
As
been
soon
around.
as soon as somebody found a drug that did something that wasn't kill you,
Yeah.
So
They were like,
Adam ate-
they
Adam-
were just doing it from
Adam ate the apple off the tree and was like, fucking knowledge, shit.
well, and there's no sin.
Hell yeah.
What the fuck? I
Dude,
can just get
Eve,
high.
check this shit.
Well, it turns
we
out
were-
the apple was fermented and had ergot mold on it.
And we...
Yeah,
And
baby.
that was
We
the
continued-
tree of knowledge, booze and acid.
You know,
And we continue getting high since then.
Right. I mean, if you believe in that.
I mean, shit.
Guerra Dulce has studied drug and alcohol use in prehistoric Eurasia and told HuffPost Science that she conducted the review to provide a comprehensive picture of drug use around the world. Since there are no written records to provide evidence for drug use thousands of years ago, scientists look at ancient remains like the fossils of psychoactive plants, the residue of alcohol and other psychoactive chemicals, and prehistoric drawings to get a sense of how drugs were used. Quote, considering the failures of the war on drugs, perhaps our modern society should look into the past and learn something from the, quote, the primitive, so that we might find out how to maximize the potential benefits and minimize the potential for harm of the substances that humans have been using for millennia.
So you're saying, so that's saying banning substances that have been used and normalized for millennia is probably not the best way to deal with their introduction to society.
Indeed, that it does sound like that's what Dr. Guerradolce is saying.
I don't know if I agree with it, except
Gonna say,
that I agree.
I'm not
I
liking
agree
this.
entirely with it.
So, goes on
Except for
to
crack.
excerpt her review. The review touches on key examples of prehistoric drug use, including the following: alcohol. The earliest alcohol drink dates back to 7,000, 6,000 BC. Residues of the drink, and this is like evidence of right? So evidence
Yeah,
of.
archaeological evidence.
Right? Archaeological evidence, which was found in China. A mixture of rice, honey, and fermented grapes or other fruit. Hallucinogens. The earliest fossil remains of the hallucinogenic San Pedro cactus found in a cave in Peru date back to between 86 and 56,000 BC. Or sorry,
Damn.
5600 BC. The
Oh.
seeds of mezcal beans found in what is now southern Texas and northern Mexico date from the end of the 9th millennium BC to 1000 AD. So literally 10,000 years, like they found fossil evidence, 10,000 years of this use of this substance. Small stone sculptures called mushroom stones found in Guatemala, Mexico, Honduras, and El Salvador suggest the hallucinogenic mushrooms were used in sacred cults between 500 BC and 900 AD. So opium, mid 6th millennium BC. We'll just
This sounds like the
coca leaves, 8,000 years ago. Tobacco, 2,000 years ago. Or no, sorry, 2000 BC.
Oh, I was going to say, thank God for
4,000
Jesus.
4,000 years ago. The review was published online on January 2nd in Time and Mind, the Journal of Archaeological Conscience and Culture. And again, we're going to just, I guess we haven't said this yet, but we'll try and provide links to all these things. So if anybody wants to chase these rabbit holes a little bit more,
Chase them.
you can. But what this doctor is saying is that we've clearly been doing drugs for a long
very
freaking
long
time. And so in all this, it becomes clear that there's no such swerve moment for caffeine. Maybe it hasn't arrived yet. Maybe none of the moments produced by drugs yet in our society have. Maybe they're so far lost into antiquity that we'll never ever be able to document or understand them. From ancient Chinese emperors to 900-year-old teacups to the largest cash crop on the world, it's obvious that humans have been using the substance for thousands and thousands of years, that anywhere that these things grow, people do them. Right? And there's plenty of archaeological data to support that statement. The little is to be found on caffeine specifically. And I think that perhaps this is because no one has really had an axe to grind with caffeine. Everybody, you know what I mean? Everybody does it. It's hardly restricted.
It's like how in the 30s you could smoke literally anywhere. Just like everybody does it.
Bro, in the 80s, you could pretty much smoke anywhere still.
But I'm speaking strictly about like the 20s, 30s, 40s.
But yes.
They're like, what do you mean you don't smoke?
It's the only one of these alkaloid drugs that doesn't suffer from severe regulation, if not being just outright prohibited. Everybody does it. It's in everything. Our kids we give it to our kids. And like I said, it's the world's largest cash crop. Could we make a case for maybe some information suppression about the actual effects of caffeine? Is there such a thing as big caffeine, like we say big oil or big auto, or
Yeah.
And it turns out that there probably is.
Weird.
And that caffeine is most likely not very good for you. According to author Salo Ivan Regis, there may be a bunch of really shady things about caffeine, which he gets into in his book, Dark Secrets of Caffeine.
Oh,
Volume 1, but
shit.
there is no other volumes.
Weird. That's actually the weirdest thing about the book.
and he died 6 months
he
after he
died.
published the book.
Right,
volume
he's
1.
dead. He's dead now. So
Tripped over an ice pick.
I read a little bit. I read a little bit of this book. I didn't read all of it. It's, to be honest, very
Dense.
dense. Yeah, it's I guess maybe on some level, I drink coffee every day. I just drank some.
You didn't want to finish the book.
No, I don't think I did. I didn't want to hear how horrible
You're
my absolutely favorite
You're a
thing
different
to
kind
do.
of coward. You know that? You're an intellectual
No, and I
coward.
also just couldn't care less about reading this whole book. But
Wait, what was his name again?
The author?
The author, yeah.
Sallow Ivan Regis.
Sallow Ivan Regis would be ashamed of you.
Yes, I'm sure he would be. Sorry, bud. You're still
Sorry,
getting your
Sallow.
book plugged. I expect my check. Anyway,
Wait, you get a check?
I did read the first couple chapters in which he poses his this idea that in fact the companies, the corporations that have a vested interest in making money off of caffeine and caffeine related products are primarily the people who are doing the research about caffeine, and
Wow.
that they spend a lot of money to tell everybody about the benefits of caffeine, and they probably spend nearly as much money making sure that people don't know the harms of it. And
That sounds unfamiliar. Is
Yeah.
that a niche kind of thing that happens in business?
they are doing it exactly in the same way that the tobacco industry did.
Oh, tobacco does it too.
It's
Weird.
wild, wild, right? Nicotine.
It's almost like
caffeine.
profits matter more than people.
In a way, it does. In
Weird.
a capitalist society, that is often the
Huh.
unfortunate outcome of progress.
It just doesn't seem likely. I'm gonna have to do some research.
Right. And in the first few chapters, he starts to talk about this doctor, like in all these things, like the automotive industry hiding the dangers of lead as
Yeah.
an additive in gasoline, the tobacco industry hiring and hiding the dangers of tobacco, and the caffeine industry, the sugar industry, doing all the exact same
Don't
thing.
forget
And all
about the Coke industry.
You mean the CIA?
Yeah. Well, cut. Edit that out. Edit it out. Sorry.
And in all those things, in all those instances, there's always a person who leads an almost what is it called when your religion forces you to go? A crusade. Thank you.
You're welcome.
They almost lead a crusade against the industry that is poisoning the population. That every one of these instances has had this white knight or linchpin.
Yeah.
the Mother Jones,
Somebody who speaks loud.
right, somebody who is also committed to finding out the truth and stuff. And so this guy Sallow seems to have found his white knight in caffeine, a certain gentleman by the name of Dr. Jack E. James, who you can find if you just Google his name and caffeine, you'll find a bunch of stuff that he's published. And I didn't really dig any deeper than that in it. But it became abundantly obvious right away that just like anything, just like any drug, that the difference between between it being a drug and a poison is in fact the dosage, and that
Yeah, that's toxicology 101.
Thank you. Yeah, for sure. And that
He said drunkenly.
and that caffeine can very easily kill you. Not with cups of coffee. You'd have to drink like several hundred cups of coffee.
I mean, truckers test that on a daily basis.
But
Yeah.
if you took a tablespoon of pure caffeine, you would die
Yeah.
Yeah.
instantly.
eight espresso shots, fine.
Totally fine.
Yeah.
Just anxiety.
Yeah. 16 caffeine pills.
Paranoia,
Not aid.
anxiety.
Dude.
Not aid.
You guys distracted me from what I was saying because now I'm fucking as high as Sean is. I encourage anybody who's interested, though, in finding out what the adverse effects of caffeine might be. And these things depend entirely on your body type, your metabolism, your genetic
Sensitivity
history.
to it, yeah.
Right, all these things. One person's treatment could be another person's poison. It's everybody's an individual in some way.
And you know what? Do some research for us. If
Yeah.
you've got some ideas that you think are really like mainstream, like I got a couple episodes about like some pretty interesting things you see in the in like the grocery store. So I got some stories about that. So if you've got any curiosities, things that you're interested in, like how do apples make their way to the grocery store, anything like that, like send us your ideas. We're happy to take a look into that stuff because, yeah, the especially with caffeine, we don't often think about like how it comes from the grocery store. It doesn't come from anywhere else. Like Indonesia, there perhaps hasn't been wars fought about it.
Oh, right, exactly.
Yeah.
It's the largest cash crop in the world.
Yeah, and so if you guys have any ideas, send us them. We're happy to take a gander. Sam,
So, yeah.
I feel a little disgruntled by this episode.
Because you didn't want to hear that caffeine was maybe shitty.
Yeah.
Sorry, I had to leave it on a negative note, but the truth needs to be out there. And I didn't really want to make the entire podcast about how shitty coffee was. I was really, in fact, looking for how has coffee influenced our society. And so I guess I want to try and answer that.
So they have proven, I heard by science quotes somewhere,
Science quotes.
yeah, that if you
Great
drink
source.
at night,
Great source.
you should drink coffee in the morning. It's better for you than worse.
Huh.
I'm gonna
Because
leave
it's
that
a
really-
diuretic and it causes elevated kidney function or something like that. And
That makes sense.
it would elevate
As long as you drink it with water.
it would elevate your blood pressure, your heart rate, and
So if you drink at night and a decent amount when you get up in the
Look-
morning, get that little pick me up, and don't.
every
feel bad about
scientist
it.
knows that when you got a bourbon hangover, a good cup of something caffeinated, it's just what you need to get the sciencing done.
Really is. Put some brandy into your
I think
eggnog.
Stephen Hawking said that, actually.
I think he did. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I saw him sipping on brandy.
You wanted to try, but you know you weren't going to be able to do
Sean
it.
tried for a pun. You could see it in his face.
Could only
Couldn't go
touch
for
my
it.
throat.
So, any final thoughts before we?
Well, I still have to answer the final
you're
question. What?
Oh, you're answering it.
Oh,
I
I'm
thought you
gonna
were just
make it.
leaving it
No,
out
I'm
there.
gonna actually try
Oh,
to
shit.
answer my original quandary. Is like, how did caffeine affect our society?
Well, let me give you the floor, sir.
So, as far as Western society goes, at least, and I think that you will find it true anywhere that people gather over a caffeinated beverage, a coffee house, a tea house, socially chewing cola nut. In South America, they share mate as a group, you know, and this is how caffeine has affected our society, because it puts us together over a common thing, a common
Substance.
liked and enjoyed event, like a meal, sharing food, right? The idea of sharing food or a drug, or getting high with your homies, right?
Getting high with your homies.
But it also stimulates talking, and it agitates you. You get, too much caffeine will give you anxiety. And so what I'd say is that coffee, more than a lot of things, it's coffee that is what ferments revolution. It's coffee that actually is like, it's caffeine, not coffee, but caffeine is the center little hinge pin to almost every conversation where the world changed, where a swerve may have occurred.
Yeah.
And in that way, there is no swerve, so to speak, but it's in all of it.
It was just over coffee.
It was just over coffee. Right.
Well, and sometimes we think about like the term coffee shop revolutionaries, people who just talk about it. And sometimes just like spreading ideas is the point of revolution.
But in fact,
Is this injustice?
during the French Revolution, where the revolutionaries met and discussed their plans to begin with, were the coffee shops, because that was the most sociably acceptable place for random people to be meeting together and talking.
You want to get together at a point when everybody's usually tired and we need to be awake? Yeah, that sounds great. Let's meet at the coffee shop.
Right.
We can be...
The cafe.
Yeah.
Le café.
La cafe.
La café.
When nobody's there and they're
Vive la resistance!
Yeah,
Le café! So that is, I guess, what I found out about caffeine. Like anything, like any drug, it's not safe. There is no one without the other, you know?
For Loco.
All things have a price. And as a hedonist, to some degree or another, I balance the hedonic value of like the pleasure of something versus the price I might pay. And that's just what society always has to do with these things. We have to balance and value where something should be regulated because there is too much social disturbance or health issue or whatever from its unrestricted use.
So
and
you heard it
we
first.
Don't do that
Here at Black Sheep and Bad Apples. If the government tries to start restricting caffeine, we revolt.
Well,
we
in fact, the
revolt on the
government
first of the month after that, everyone, because they are trying to keep us from our rights.
caffeine is regulated in soft drinks in a lot of countries. And it's the only type of regulation that caffeine seems to have. But it's about how much caffeine can you put into a can of Monster Energy, basically. Because early on, before Red Bull and stuff, there was no regulation on like how much caffeine could be
soda.
in. Right. Fuck 250 milligrams of caffeine in one little 12-ounce can. That's
5 Mountain Dews in one.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And
Run
then
around the
Monster
block.
came along and was putting like,
Heat stroke.
400 milligrams of caffeine into, and it, 400 milligrams of caffeine in a whole day is not a bunch, but it's still a lot. It's like a pot
When
and a
you're
half of
only
coffee or
drinking
something.
that though, and no water, running around in a desert,
Right.
And when you can get it in one can.
So
boom,
That's-
power
yeah.
slam. It's
some
like,
hundreds
Power slam.
Some
Gosh,
hundreds
not
of people have died from consuming energy drinks, and that's about the only regulation that's occurred with caffeine.
Not
Otherwise,
FDA
as a dietary supplement, it's completely unregulated. You can buy pure caffeine powder in a 1-pound tub on Amazon.
Big caffeine's out to get
yeah.
us.
Right.
Rail that shit.
We're coming for you, big caffeine.
We're coming for you, big caffeine. Folgers, you better just hang up your coats.
FBI, open up.
Anyway, so thank you, Sam. This has been a very
thanks
lovely
for,
episode.
letting me run with that.
No problem.
For sure.
Host takeover is over. Except, for next week.
Were we gonna announce Joe's topic?
Yeah,
Did we really quite figure out what the heck it is?
honestly, I don't
Pictures
quite remember
of
what it was.
animals
So
that
it was-
are
okay,
his
no.
Yeah,
spirit
so
animals.
look at the group message.
yeah, no, it's a cryptid topic.
Yeah, Joe's going. He's going hard on cryptids.
And
with cartoon.
Would you?
it's
Describe
the
the-
squonk. What is the squonk?
Squonk.
it's
Just
the
describe
squonk.
it for the audience.
So apparently Pennsylvania has a cryptid that is so ugly that he just cries about it all the time, and the way that you find him is to follow his path of tears, the squonk. And it looks like as if I don't
can
even
only
know.
imagine
It's like
where this rabbit trail is gonna go.
gosh, it's like as if a pug got dipped in acid and then its legs were shoved way close together and made horrible, and all its hair was removed, and it was really wrinkly, and it was crying, and it had a snotty nose and no tail. A tail that looks like a turd.
I
The-
knew
the
a
one
kid
in the
like that
bottom-
in second
The
grade.
Pennsylvania squonk.
The one on the bottom left.
Squonk.
The one on the bottom left looks like Jake from Adventure Time.
A little bit,
Yeah,
but
if,
the rest of them
if
look.
he was just haunted by a wooden ghost.
Yeah, it's that's like a woodblock etching of the squonk.
Yeah.
You know, like, or what is that when they burn it? Brandy.
Yeah. Or
Or
the one in the top right.
burning?
Also,
burning. Thank you.
the one on the top right also looks like a crying mole rat from Fallout 3 or Fallout 4.
Yeah.
Yeah. Pretty gross. And so that's what Joe apparently is bringing next week. But who knows? We might be wrong because Joe is amazing and
The most
passionate.
interesting man in Joe's truck while he's driving it alone. Joe.
Definitely. So, Mr. Sean, how are you feeling about tonight?
I just wanted a dramatic pause for a minute. With
Dude,
that.
I just got so
Well,
nervous that you hated it.
Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
What is your episode going to be consisting of? Is it a secret
leaving
still?
that, yep, it's still leave it up to
Motherfucker,
next
he
week
doesn't
to
know.
introduce it.
He's got no idea.
Yep.
More game episode.
Well, anyway, Sam, I want to say thank you very much for,
man.
hosting this, man. It was a lot of fun.
I had a blast,
appreciate
thanks.
your
Thanks
your
everybody for
patience.
listening to me ramble.
Yeah, and Sean, thank you for hosting our show
Oh yeah.
and being a main contributor to the sarcastic, if not just super stoned. You're like the peanut gallery. Coming really, there it is.
The peanut gallery was a duck.
The peanut gallery was a duck.
And I had a friend.
And as you guys know, I am Lauren O'Brien. This has been Black Sheep and Bad Apples podcast, where we write
Say
something,
stuff, do stuff,
say stuff, do stuff, and then
get slightly inebriated.
get
Oh.
inebriated.
Hobo
Thank you guys for
Johnson.
listening. Fuck Hobo Johnson.
Fuck Hobo Johnson.
I love you. You aren't that bad of a person.
Get all of us, pussy.
Remember to wear your mask, and that you're a good person, and life loves you, and the world is
All right, cut
so
this
bad.
guy off.